Hey everyone, how's it going? So a lot happened in part 1 of our retrospective on the gritty world of fairy tales, and though I will leave a link below to watch part 1, here's a little recap of the season of Fables. Well, we were introduced to the Fabletown community, a secret society of fairy tale characters who were forced out of their realm by a mysterious being known as the Adversary. Bigby Wolf, aka the Big Bad Wolf, is the lawman of the community and starts the series with a missing persons case with Snow White regarding her sister Rose Red, only for it to be a hoax involving screwing over a pirate with her boyfriend at the time, Ch.1, and as punishment goes with Snow to another secret community, this time for non-human looking fables called The Farm, only for them to walk into a revolution run by Goldilocks, stopping her, but she escapes, leading her to team up with the previously mentioned pirate Bluebeard to kill Snow and Bigby, but fails thanks to Prince Charming, who kills Bluebeard to gain his title and wealth. Now Snow and Bigby are able to take out Goldilocks. Now in the aftermath, Snow, who along with Bigby was under the influence of a spell, find out that under said influence, she had gone pregnant with Bigby's children. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain how messed up that is for them. And though Bigby does want to make things work, Snow needs time for herself. Did the two work things out? Well, let's wrap up this first chapter, starting with diving into Volume 4, March of the Wooden Soldiers. It all starts with Boy Blue blowing his horn in sadness. Snow walks up to him, and we learn that despite Remembrance Day, a day when the Fables commemorate when they fled the homeland, she's reminded that it didn't take one day to do. It was a long, grueling process to get as many Fables out, and Blue was one of the last. And heads up, it wasn't pretty. To Blue and the other Fables that escaped, on that final day, it became their own Remembrance Day, as they saw what was left of their old lives destroyed and the loss of friends and loved ones. And for Blue, it was especially true in regards to the latter. This of course leads to a flashback to the final days of the war, where we see a woman being chased by a horde of goblins and orcs, but she's saved by Robin Hood, who looks a lot like Green Arrow, which makes sense given he was the inspiration for the hero. But yeah, Craig Hamilton, the artist in the story, made him a dead ringer for Oliver Queen. It kind of made me wonder if they ever considered making this canon with the main DC universe and having Oliver straight up become the new Robin Hood in a potential crossover story. I mean, that's probably not what they were going for, but it would have been a cool story. Joining him along with the Merry Men, there's Britmart from The Fairy Queen by Edmund Spencer, three of the Crow brothers from the fairy tale The 12 Brothers, along with Boy Blue and other familiar faces like Dr. Swinehart, Bluebeard, and Cinderella, with their leader being Colonel Bearskin from the story of the same name. Seriously, this issue alone will introduce you stories that you didn't even know existed, unless you were an insane bibliophile. The woman they saved reveals herself to be Red Riding Hood, who, after some time, Blue falls for, and she the same, to the point where when it seems only one of them would make it on the last boat to the Mundy world, Blue was willing to make the sacrifice. But during the final battle, Bearskin gave Blue a magic cloak, simply known as the Witch's Cloak, that magically teleports him away so he could tell the others what they did to save their lives. Though when he gets there, Red Riding Hood is nowhere to be seen. As it turns out, she left the boat to look for Blue and die with him in battle, where she seemingly killed. The issue ends with Blue and the other Fables toasting to those who fell so they could start anew in the Mundy world. This was a great issue. Besides getting a better idea of how dangerous the Adversary is with the sheer number of his army, we also get to know the Fables who stayed to fight, like Robin Hood and Bretmart, who continue to be heroes to the very end. Hell, they were so likable as characters, despite only being in one issue. It's heartbreaking to know that they are not going to make it. I will say the romance between Blue and Red was a bit obvious and a bit rushed, but it actually makes sense given what we learn about Red Riding Hood, along with her tragic death, or so it seems. As we enter the March of the Wooden Soldiers proper, we see a familiar looking woman heading to Fabletown, and though there are some complications, it seems that she's able to take care of herself. More on that in a bit. Meanwhile, back in Fabletown, things seem to be pretty normal, well besides Colin's severed head waking up Snow in the middle of the night, telling her she's pregnant with multiple children and how something is coming for them, but not sure what. Meanwhile, Bigby is pissed off at Mayor Cole for letting Charming take Bluebeard's position after murdering him. Since, traitor or not, Bigby is still a lawman and believes that Bluebeard should have been taken down by the book. Hell, he can't even arrest Bluebeard's butler, Hobbs, for assisting since Charming helped him by talking Mayor Cole into granting him amnesty in exchange for giving him the proof of Bluebeard's treachery. And it doesn't get better as after him and Snow briefly discuss the pregnancy, Snow tells him and Buffkin that she believes Charming isn't going to be satisfied with just taking Bluebeard's position. And it turns out there is a law in Fabletown where a citizen can call a special election if they gain enough support from at least 500 citizens, meaning that he plans to replace Cole. But before they could even figure out a way to stop him, the mysterious woman arrives to the woodlands, revealing herself to be Red Riding Hood. At first, people are happy to see that a friend of theirs survived, but then they immediately realize and ask the question, how'd she even get here? Her explanation? She claims that in the final battle, Red Riding Hood was captured and enslaved for centuries, but eventually was able to escape and find one of the portals in Oz was that took her to Canada. Huh, you'd think it would lead to Kansas. Cole's ecstatic to hear this, since she's the first in centuries to make it back, and could mean that there are still people out there fighting. But Bigby and Snow aren't as sure, but more on that in a sec. Meanwhile, Charming is starting his campaign, and of course he's promising people a tax break, better health care, more glamour, all things people like Beauty and the Beast and the animals of the farm were complaining about. Sounds great, but if you've ever been paying attention, you know as damn well he's not going to keep any of his promises. While the campaign's going on, we see a group of men in black roaming around and demanding guns and calling people meatheads and complaining about this world. A bit of a tangent, but I'm pretty sure these guys inspired the Krang in the 2012 TMNT show, since they dress like them, they sound pretty close, they just need to add emphasis more on their location, and they act like they're in a hive mind, which isn't too far off for what they actually are. Anyway, back with Bigby and Snow, they both don't fully buy Red's story, Bigby especially, as both Red's story and what's transpiring reminds him a lot of some military tactics he learned in World War II, where the enemy would often send in spies in the guise of defectors. Plus, Bigby was told by Blue years ago that the enemies told them that they wouldn't leave any of them alive, so why was she different? Plus, all the gates were shut down centuries ago to avoid getting followed, all except for one, that being the Canadian gate. That gate was actually taken by the adversary, and he ordered it to be closed. Bigby and the others believed that he planned to attack them once he conquered the rest of the homeland, and to make sure no one else can get out. The only way Red could open the gate is if she had some serious magical power to open the gate herself, or someone let her out. It's also why Snow knew one day that they would have to fight the adversary again, back in Volume 2. Bigby hoped to get some help from the Fable K, the young boy from the Snow Queen, who has the ability to see all the evil within someone by just looking at them, but K can't help. Turns out every 4 years, he cuts out his eyes because it was driving him crazy seeing all the evils everyone around him had committed. I mean, I can't blame him. I can't even imagine what it's like talking to a realtor with him. With no other option, Bigby heads to Canada to investigate the gateway. Back with the Men in Black, they've been raising hell all over the place, and the only one who knows what they're up to is Jack, as they got into a fight with him. But given his past, no one believes him. Meanwhile, Charming is still running his campaign and talking with Beauty and Beast, offering them Snow and Bigby's positions once he wins, since Charming knows that neither of them will want to work under him once he becomes mayor. And while all that's going on, Blue and Red, man, more than I say it sounds like I'm talking about a fucking Pokemon fanfic, have been reconnecting, ending with the two sleeping together. But during the lovemaking, Blue realized the horrible truth. This isn't Red Riding Hood. As for how he knows, him and Red slept together before, and let's say she's missing a few details, if you know what I mean. She knocks him out and later tortures him for a time, even revealing she gained the info regarding Blue's relationship with Red from the real one. Meanwhile, Bigby has found the Fables in charge of guarding the gate all dead, and the gate is opened, meaning that the adversary is making his move, and he needs to get back home. This is proven even further as the men come to the woodlands, dumping the tortured Blue, giving them a message from the adversary, which essentially is surrender or die, though they also reveal that they were interested in Pinocchio, calling him brother, and offers him a chance to return to his puppet form instead of being meat. Yep, they're puppets, the wooden soldiers of the title, which horrifies Pinocchio, since though it proves that his father Geppetto is still alive, it also means that he is likely a slave in making these puppets for the adversary. And also because he used to be one of these guys, he knows that they're facing an army that doesn't need sleep, food, or suffer fatigue. Luckily, Rose and the farm come in from the weapons from Volume 2, and after Snow talks to all the witches and wizards of Fabletown to hide what's coming to the Mundies, well, you're gonna want to get some popcorn for this. Fabletown becomes a full-on battlefield as they clash with the wooden men. Guns fired, spells cast, dragons blazing, Bigby coming back just in the nick of time to maul a good chunk of the enemy. However, though they are getting victories, the Fables do suffer casualties, like Wayland is gunned down, several of the animals are killed, Boo Bear in particular, and Pinocchio, who try to use their respect for him to get them to stop, but ends up getting his head cut off instead, as they couldn't see very well thanks to the fire. But in the end, they are victorious, with Frau Totenkinder from the first volume taking out the fake Red Riding Hood, who turns out to be Baba Yaga from Russian folklore. I remind her why she's the Witch of the Black Forest. After the battle is won, the dead are laid to rest, with their bodies being sent to the Witching Well. And if you played Wolf Among Us, you probably know that this is essentially their Phantom Zone. Though they do put their dead in there, they also put their worst criminals. At least to them, it seems to be a black hole of nothingness, but more on that later. Though Baba Yaga is still alive, Bigby and Frau let the others believe that she's dead, while she's actually barely clinging to life, locked up with the wooden men, where they plan to get some information from her. Afterwards, time passes, people mourn like Rose and the farm for Wayland's death, Papa and Mama Bear for their son, though Mama finds out that she's pregnant. As I said, they tend to get replaced, and there's some hope for Flycatcher and Blue, as I believe Pinocchio could be brought back, as when he died, he became a puppet again. and the wood that he's made of still retains some magic. And finally, the story wraps up with Snow White telling Bigby her water broke. Volume 4 is an epic start to the biggest adventure the Fables will go on. They bounce multiple plot lines very well, though I will admit the reveal of Red being a spy was pretty obvious given her scene in the beginning. Just felt they should have saved that reveal for when Bigby went to Canada. Plus, it gave us some time to get to know more about Blue, Pinocchio, and Flycatcher, though more for the first two, as we see how Blue is, in his heart, a hopeless romantic, and though Pinocchio is a harsh little bastard, does care for those he loves, like when he realizes his father is alive and is worried for Blue in the woodlands after the soldiers made their threat. Then of course we have Charming and how he's playing the masses while still helping them fight back, showing that even when he's fighting with them, he's still on his own side. Though to see how that goes, well, we'll need to talk about the next volume. Volume 5, The Mean Seasons, is actually pretty chill by comparison, as we mostly wrap up Snow's pregnancy and Charming's campaign. Though we start off with Cinderella, who works as Fabletown's master of espionage, finding the Ichabod Crane from the Legends of Sleepy Hollow, and the former deputy mayor of Fabletown turned traitor if you played the Wolf Among Us game, which if you have, makes this ending even more satisfying. It's a solid issue, and like the Jack Horner story in Volume 3, it's sort of a backdoor pilot to her series. After her story, we also learn more about Bigby's time in World War II, and it's pretty kick-ass, and a really great story to read during Halloween as Bigby faces off against Frankenstein's monster, who's being controlled by the Nazis in an attempt to make an undead army, and with Bigby going full-on Wolfman to tear everyone apart. BJ Blazkowicz would be proud. I'd also recommend the story if you're a fan of the OG Creature Commandos comics, and of course Universal Horror Monsters, as they do pay homage to the films. As for Snow's children, well, as stressful as it is, along with Bigby having issues with Nurse Sprat, the wife of Jack Sprat from the nursery rhyme, the cubs are born, seemingly 6 cubs, 3 boys, Connor, Darren, and Ambrose, named after Flycatcher, ain't that nice of them, and 3 girls, Blossom, Theris, in Winter. Bigby is full of joy, but Snow is concerned since 4 of them don't look human, and they have the ability to float, more on that in a minute, which means since they can't pass as human, her and the kids have to go to the farm, which Bigby isn't exactly welcome due to his past. Meanwhile, Charming won the election and is now mayor, and as he predicted, Snow and Bigby leave. They give the keys to Beauty and the Beast, but not before they got some info from one of the Woodmen's heads, who explained to them that their father didn't want to send the whole army since he wanted to know how advanced their technology was. And since they were victorious, the adversary will most likely play it safe and keep his distance for some time. With that, Snow and the kids head to the farm, and Bigby plans to be on his own for a while. Since yeah, he swore to uphold a system for years, and all it's done is separate him and his children. Yeah, I wouldn't feel like being there either. He might help out when the adversary comes back, but for now, he's pretty much done with them. He tried to talk Snow into taking her and the kids with him, but she feels doing so would betray what she stood for, and it'd feel like she's leaving the community behind. Bigby's response?
Of course not. For all your griping about how ill-used you were, you still cling to your fantasies of castles and princes, where dogs know their place in the kennels.
This move might come off as selfish, but as a reminder, he followed Fabletown's rules like a loyal dog, and instead of getting rewarded for helping them and withholding the law for centuries, as I said a second ago, tell him he's unable to be with his children and the woman he loves, just because they still see him as the big bad wolf, the villain of several tales, even after helping them with a major victory in the last volume. I can understand the hostility. I don't agree with it, but I get it. While Snow gets settled with the kids, Fabletown immediately falls apart. Boy Blue, one of the few people left who was good at his job, left to the homelands to go save the real Red Riding Hood. And though at first Charming thought it'd be pointless, as the adversary seemingly has the only way to enter the homeland, they quickly find out that Blue stole the witch's cloak, which, as I mentioned before, is able to teleport him to wherever he desires. And along with that, he also stole the Volble Blade from the Jabberwocky poem from Alice Through the Looking Glass. As the months pass, Charming has lost control of the masses, as, like a lot of politicians who took the job for money and power, didn't keep any of his campaign promises, either because he didn't actually know how to do so, or he simply didn't want to. Beauty is fighting with Buffkin and can't understand the paperwork, and though Beast does try to keep the peace, he still screws up royally when it comes to Flycatcher. You see, Fly wasn't just the janitor of the Woodlands, he was actually under probation like Jack and Rose. But Beast looks through the files and believes Bigby was being too harsh, though chooses to let him go. Which sounds great, but not really. The reason why Bigby did what he did wasn't to punish Fly, but to help him. Unlike Beauty and the Beast, who were at least able to get back on their feet after losing their fortune, Flycatcher wasn't as lucky. He was homeless and desperate to find a place to call home. Bigby put him on probation so he wouldn't be on the streets, but now he's back to being homeless again, showing that despite being seen as a harsh lawman, Bigby was finding ways to help some of the Fables out who truly needed it. Luckily, Beast realizes what he did and gets him back home, but still, it's a major eye-opener for him on what exactly Bigby's job was. And to make matters worse, a mysterious force has started killing Fables, starting with Mr. Webb, the spider from the nursery rhymes Little Miss Muffet, who used glamour to hide his spidery form. And this force is spreading as it claims 5 other victims, with it even heading to the farm, where Snow and the kids, who have been doing pretty good, though Snow is getting letters from Frau congratulating her on her 7 children, despite her only having 6. And along with that, they are met by an unexpected family member who could actually help with their situation. You ever wondered how Bigby could conjure up great winds or shapeshift without glamour, but other animal fables couldn't? Well, the answer is simple. His father is a god. Meet Mr. North, aka the Mountain King, aka the North Wind, aka Boreas, the Greek god of the North Winds. He came to help his grandchildren. With Bigby unable to be at the farm, he comes to teach the kids how to control their powers. Bigby's shapeshifting, along with the kids' ability to float, all derive from his own godly abilities. He does care for Snow and the kids, but is also an attempt to make amends with Bigby, since back in the day, he took the form of a wolf, slept with Bigby's mother, and left her and put her in a state of emotional distress. Because Greek god. As for the mysterious force, he was able to determine that the one behind these deaths is a Zephyr, a living gust of wind who feeds off the air itself, though this one prefers to feed on air within living things. North says it's rare though for this to happen, as most Zephyrs at birth know not to do this, and the only ones that do are usually because of a birth defect, which North and his fellow wind gods kill as a result, which is all kinds of fucked up, though I'm not shocked since again, Greek gods, this was unfortunately common. North helps Beast look for it, but we quickly learn who the Zephyr really is, and it turns out the letter Frau sent was right. Snow did have 7 children. She just didn't see him, since unlike his siblings, who took from their mother and father in appearance, he took more from his grandfather. That's right, the Zephyr is their son, a living gust of wind. He's been trying to find his parents these past few months, and though it took time, he learned how to track Snow down like his father. Snow, with a broken heart, is forced to send him away, and makes him promise to never take the era of living things again. She tells him to find his father, knowing Bigby would protect him. As he leaves, he says he was sorry he was bad. Yeah, this was a heartbreaker. You can tell Snow wanted him to be with her and his siblings, but is forced to send him away and pray that North doesn't find him, since he seems to follow the law with no exception. Especially since, though he didn't understand what he did was wrong, he did still take those lives, which the people of Fabletown aren't gonna let slide. Snow, in a way to keep her son's memory alive, sets up 7 cupcakes for the kid's birthday, though Rose doesn't know why. Volume 5 was more chill when it came to action, but definitely heavier on the drama, while also expanding on the greater world. Like Snow and Bigby going their separate ways, Charming and his crew realizing the gravity of their situation, and getting a better understanding on how and why certain characters do what they do. Though we mostly focus on the characters that stuck around in Fabletown, what about those who didn't? Well, let's get into Volume 6, Homeland, and find out. With a name like that, you know we finally go to the land of stories and madness, Hollywood! But it was too easy. Before we see what Blue is doing in the Homeland, we see the start of Jack's solo series. As him, along with a Lilliputian named Jill, get it, still several treasures from Fabletown, head off to Hollywood and make it where he, after only 5 years, has started his own movie studio and made a trilogy of films, but loses it all as Jill, sick of his crap, rats him out to Beast, who though at first looks like he's ready to throw down, which by the way, if you're wondering why he's able to control his form now, Frau actually altered his curse, since she was the one that placed it on him, meaning that she can actually make the curse work any way she wants. So made it where he could do it at will to make him better at his job. But no, Beast isn't like Bigby, and just can't stand fighting, so just gives Jack a warning, and tells him to leave, which leads to a solo series. It's a decent story and a fitting send-off to Jack as he enters his spin-off, while setting up his own adventures. Though I will admit, I'm not a fan of the art. David Hahn is a decent artist, but I felt the characters looked a bit too stiff and wooden, which is saying a lot when the actual wooden men look more expressive. Anywho, let's get into the main story and see what Blue's been up to in the last 5 years. Well damn. After centuries, Blue has taken everything he's learned and experienced to go full-on Dread Pirate Roberts on some goblin asses, fighting many powerful foes like the riders from the Russian tale, Phasalia the Beautiful, who represents the time of day, and even just some cat to help out Fable Mice in exchange for info, all while evading enemy hands since the cloak can grant him not just teleportation, but also shapeshifting, so he can blend into a crowd, or take the form of something small like a mouse, or something that can fly like a bird, all to save Red and Geppetto, along with possibly restoring Pinocchio. Pinocchio. Because he's causing so much trouble, it leads the adversaries to send in someone who's just as dangerous. Enter the Snow Queen, who, like in the story that she hails from, is incredibly cunning along with being powerful, causing a small blizzard wherever she walks. In this case, the adversary's city capital, knowing Blue is most likely going to strike there next. It's also where we meet the adversary, who has a pretty interesting design, as Willingham and Mark Buckingham have him resemble the orcs from Ralph Bakski's animated Lord of the Rings film, which was intentional as he's meant to invoke Sauron, with him first being sighted in the not Middle-earth mentioned in the first volume, his armies at first just being composed of goblins and orcs. Even with how the Fables talk about him, the sense that despite not being in the room, you feel his presence as if he was. Fans theorized that he was Sauron, and just called him the adversary and the Emperor to his servants just to avoid any legal issues. However, we will quickly see that this was not the case. He's not actually Sauron. Snow Queen knows that Blue is in the throne room and secures the room to make sure no one escapes. However, Blue is able to get the slip on them by taking the form of an old woman and gets close enough to... well, so much for the big bad. Of course, killing him would make things harder, as now they're throwing everything they have at Blue, ending with the Snow Queen freezing him. Meanwhile, back in Fabletown, the Woodlands get a new guest, Mowgli from the Jungle Book. He's been summoned for a special task, though before we can learn about that, the group discovers that the adversary was able to have one victory over Fabletown, as he's had trusted John, from the Brothers Grimm tale of the same name, and the trusted doorman of the Woodlands, to be his spy. How? You see, John was the most loyal knight to his king. He is literally incapable of breaking his oath. So when the adversary contacted him, revealing that his king was very much alive, he was ordered to spy for them. And for 4 years, he honored his oath, despite knowing how much that was going to hurt his friends. And though he's regretful, and they know he had no choice, Charming is a cold son of a bitch and sentences him to the witch as well. We learn that Mowgli is here to assist Charming and Beast, as they want him to use his skills that he gained from being raised by wolves to track Bigby, as he's been quiet these past 5 years, and they're no longer sure he is up to help willingly anymore. In exchange, Charming as the mayor will pardon Bagheera since he's been locked up for playing a part in Goldie's rebellion. Back in the homeland, Blue wakes up in a cage and the decapitated head of the adversary. He's under the watch and care of Geppetto, and it doesn't take a detective with enhanced wolf senses to see the truth. He isn't a prisoner of the adversary, he is the adversary. It started small. Back in the day, Pinocchio would often go on adventures, leaving his father alone. Tired of the solitude, he began making more puppets with the magic wood that he got from the sacred grove, the forest that he lives in, and what brought Pinocchio to life. The Blue Fairy would often come along and turn some of them into real boys and girls, though also made sure they would stay loyal to him and only leave if he wished. And at first, he was content. Things were good until one day a group of nobles came to him for an unusual task. The count they followed was a cruel man who taxed the poor and left the land in bad shape, and asked the old woodcarver to make a perfect copy of him, while the fairy used her magic to make him a real human, but under their control. Yeah, they literally made a puppet leader. They were the deep state before it was cool, and it worked, but as the puppet count got older, his oldest son, for his father's loyalty to the kingdom, was closer to come to power, so they had to do it again and again, eventually ending with most of the nobility being loyal puppets, along with occasionally preventing a war with a neighboring land by replacing their leaders. The process, though successful, was getting pretty annoying for Geppetto. He grew tired, but realized something. All the nobles he had under his control had wizards and witches in their council, and commanded them to teach him all that they knew about magic, leading to...
Soon enough, I understood how the Blue Fairy did what she did. I just didn't have her unique power source, which was her own magical nature. One night I fixed that. I equipped myself with a never-ending supply of blue magic. With the elixirs I manufacture from her, I can turn any of my children into real flesh. On my schedule, not hers. Or I can use a diluted potion to make certain aspects of a still wooden child seem real, such as the heads and hands of the soldiers you met.
Geppetto decided that for things to truly stay peaceful, he had to take full control. One kingdom, one ruler, with him pulling all the strings. He created the adversary puppet to be his figurehead, so he could do his work in peace. As he's telling Blue, he's repairing Pinocchio, and eventually brings him back to life. He's glad to be alive, but is obviously shocked to learn that his father is the monster that ruined so many lives. And to make things worse, Geppetto brings the real Red Riding Hood, it was Blue's dying request, as he does plan to kill him, only to learn the horrible truth. The Red Riding Hood he met on the final days of the war was also a fake. Another puppet he created to spy on them and learn where the final portal was. So both times, he slept with women with false pretenses, which means that Blue is a victim of, well, the word rhymes with grape. Luckily, before Geppetto could have him killed, like he planned, Blue reveals that even with the cloak removed, he can still control it, and uses it to teleport away. Pinocchio ends up staying behind, hoping he could convince his father to come to a peaceful resolution. Kid, he just told you he's taken out over thousands of kingdoms like it was nothing. I don't think a nice father-son chat is gonna help. I kid, but it does make sense, given what Geppetto told Pinocchio, feeling responsible for what his father has done, and believes that this could help make things right. Blue and the Real Red escape and return to Fabletown, and though it almost gets bloody with Grimble thinking that she's Baba Yaga, they quickly clear things up, ending Volume 6. Volume 6 is definitely one of my favorites in the series. It's filled with a lot of twists and turns, and the reveal of Geppetto as the true adversary was fascinating, and seeing what the homeland is like now after the war. Though knowing what they know now, how will the Fables deal with him? Well, we're gonna have to wait a bit, because Volume 7, Arabian Nights and Day, is a bit of a detour. So, with the title like that, it's very clear that we're gonna be focusing on Norse mythology. The volume is still pretty good, where the Fables meet the Fables from 1001 Nights, led by Sinbad, to start an alliance to help them fight Geppetto and his army, but gets bumpy as Yusuf from Yusuf and Zulika decide that because he looks like a certain Disney villain, he should get his hands on a djinn. And a djinn here is less friend-like me, more primordial being of creation and destruction. But in the end, they're successful and proceed with their alliance. There are some other factors that do come into play later, like Cole returning to help with the negotiation and becoming the ambassador, a budding romance between Flycatcher and Red Riding Hood, and possibly Blue and Rose Red, and Snow and the children mastering their shapeshifting. Though, as I said, it's better expanded in Volume 8, Wolves. Mowgli has been traveling far and wide trying to look for Bigby, and has dealt with some dangers on the way, but finally finds the wolf in Alaska, where he's trying to make a fresh start. He's got himself a home in the woods, and is even seeing someone, but Mowgli tells him it's time to get back to Fabletown, and to make sure he's still up for it, Charming has a proposition for him. We don't immediately find out what it is, but he likes what he hears and agrees. He decides not to see Snow yet, not until he finishes the mission that Charming and the others have assigned him. Using the magic beans from Jack Horner, they were able to grow a beanstalk, which kind of works as an interdimensional portal, since they were created to always lead to Giant Country, and since that's in the homeland, it gives them access. It's actually a pretty clever way of entering without anyone knowing. The mission, sneak into Geppetto's workshop, tell him that they are ready for anything he has planned for them, and blows up the whole damn workshop, though also telling him they have a few of his agents, and are willing to give them back if they choose to negotiate. Yeah, given what he's done, safe bet he does not give a crap about them. Charming follows up on his deal. If you recall, in Volume 2, we saw an area just for 3 giants and Clara the dragon to sleep. Well, since they've been awake, the area has just been free space, so Charming agreed to give the area to Bigby as private property, separate from the farm, so they aren't breaking any rules, where he could finally live with his children and Snow, who is happy to see him again, but even more happy to learn that their Zephyr's son found Bigby and was living with him in secret in Alaska. He's even named him Ghost, though it does get a bit awkward as Ghost makes it slip that his dad was seeing someone for a bit while in Alaska. With that aside, things start looking good for Bigby and Snow. Their families reunited, and after some time, Snow and Bigby rekindle their love and even get married, though still showing us that they haven't forgotten that they're getting ready for war, with Cole and the Arabian Fables and Cinderella having a mission in Giant Country. This volume was actually a big milestone, as this actually contained the series' 50th issue, so Willingham made some big shakeups, with of course wrapping up the will they won't they with Bigby and Snow, have the first big confrontation with Geppetto, and show more of the world of Fables with Giant Country. The volume also came with a few bonus features like a map of Fabletown, an updated map of the farm, and the newly created Wolf Valley, and the script for issue 50, though we're not exactly done with this chapter yet, as we enter the last 2 volumes of Chapter 1. Volume 9, Sons of an Empire, and Volume 10, The Good Prince. And oh boy, this was difficult to abridge, and I'm putting them together since they're both building up to the chapter's finale. And it starts big as Geppetto is making his moves on the Mundi world, and though the public haven't witnessed any proof of the existence of magic, since no one is left alive during the attack, and others have only seen the horrific aftermath, it's gotten to the point where the Fables decide to reveal themselves to the Pentagon, leading to an alliance where they'll help show how to fight this magical foe, and they make sure that their existence will still remain hidden to the public, leading to an amazing fight where the army and the Fable soldiers come together and face off against the enemy army in Giant Country, ending in triumphant victory. And while that's going down, we have several characters spotlighted, the first being Flycatcher, who has been getting closer to Red, and the two clearly like each other, but he's been hesitant to make a move. Remember when I said, Flycatcher volunteers, he is still technically a prince, and actually is fond of her. So, he goes for it. And though this is a pretty nice scene, kinda played off for laughs,
this would later become a bit of a plot hole on what happens later. Not after.
Despite showing otherwise, Fly never got over the loss of his wife, so when Red kissed him, he saw it as cheating, reverting back to a frog for a while. We're also introduced to Hansel from Hansel and Gretel, who after his story became traumatized and grew up to be a sociopath obsessed with killing witches, and eventually killed his own sister out of anger, and has now turned traitor, working as one of Geppetto's diplomats, though it doesn't last long. While that's going on, back at the homeland, Pinocchio realizes that trying to show kindness to his father in hopes that he will surrender ends pretty badly, as he lashes out at him when he makes him a gift out of the magic wood, saying that only he can use it. Meanwhile, at Wolf Valley, it's Christmas time, and Bigby and Snow's kids try to catch Santa, leading to a wholesome moment with one of the cubs, Ambrose, meeting the jolly old elf, who after heads to Fabletown, where he summons the spirit of Flycatcher's wife. What, we've seen Santa fight Jormungandr and team up with Batman and the Justice League, so why can't he summon the dead? Santa's only able to summon her long enough to kiss him and break his curse again. He's pretty pissed off though, as seeing her again only for her to leave opened old wounds. After that, we got a story diving into Bigby's family, his relationship with his father North, and how he still holds a grudge, but is being civil for his kids, how his brothers are even more monstrous than him, and Frau revealing that Beauty is pregnant and the baby might be more beast than expected. Then you get to volume 10, where Flycatcher is still distraught after what happened with his wife, to the point where everyone's worried for his emotional well-being, and after a talk with Red, he realizes what he has to do. Get some revenge. Over the years, I can depopulate entire towns, or countries, or worlds. I'll become a destroyer of those foul things who destroyed me so long ago. So will you help? Unfortunately, Blue doesn't see it working out. Fly's a good man, but his views on war and fighting are childish at best, and there just isn't enough time to train him. But later that night, Fly would find an unlikely ally in the Forsworn Knight, who is revealed to be Lancelot, Knight of the Round Table, and like the original Arthurian lore, betrayed King Arthur's trust by sleeping with Queen Guinevere, but instead of becoming a monk, Arthur forgave him, but felt he still needed to atone, hung himself, but all it did was lead him to become an undead spirit of prophecy that we all know now. He believes Fly is his last chance of redemption. He bestows him armor and the mighty sword Excalibur, but Fly isn't done. There's one more thing he needs to get, but it lies within the witching well. You know that thing that's supposed to be a life sentence or a final resting place? Though it seems he was planning on negotiating with the criminals to join Fabletown for a chance of redemption, we learn that when the bodies are sent there, so is the soul. So he would also be restoring life to the fallen. His plan is to go to the homeland and build a new kingdom within the sacred grove. His kingdom has some familiar faces like Wayland, Honest John, Boo Bear, along with Gretel, who was placed there after Hansel killed her. Though Bluebeard and Shere Khan followed as well, they immediately try to betray him, but end up getting killed once more. After finding the homeland and crippling Geppetto's army, as he's gained full control of the grove, he disbands his kingdom, letting his people live their own lives and making the grove into a place of peace that could never be used for war again. Ending with Flycatcher deciding that he'd rather live his life as a pauper than a prince, as he finally decides to move on and open up to Red. Finally building up to the grand finale of this chapter, Volume 11, War and Pieces. And it really kicks off by wrapping up character arcs like Blue admitting his romantic feelings towards Rose, but despite previously showing interest, she tells him they should just stay friends. Rose, come on! You should know better than anyone that no matter what gender, place, or even century, saying the phrase, just be friends, is never the right thing to say to someone you're rejecting. All you're doing is begging for pain. Though, this actually will come to play next chapter, so keep this in mind. We also get Prince Charming realizing he wasn't truly fit to be mayor and returns the title to Cole. Pinocchio returned to Fabletown and giving them any intel they could to help win the war, though it wasn't easy. And finally leading to the final assault on the Empire with the US military, and it's insane. Beginning with an awesome aerial attack, led by Charming, Sinbad, Blue, and Bigby. It is pretty kick-ass, with dragons flying, breathing fire, the team using a giant flying warship to fire cannons at it. But as cool as that is, it's actually a distraction so they could sneak Briar Rose into the kingdom and prick her finger, leading to all but the adversary puppet to succumb to the sleeping spell. It almost seems like an easy victory, but the enemy soldiers that are still awake eventually shoot them down. The four get separated. Sinbad's fine, but Charming's gravely injured and has to tend to his wounds, while Bigby and Blue are facing off against some of the enemy. Charming and Sinbad have one last plan as they carry one of the ship's bombs that are still intact and head out. While Blue, Bigby, and what's left of the team on the airship face the adversary Puppet and his army, ending with Bigby and Blue being hit with arrows, with one hitting Bigby's neck and the other to Blue's arm, which is kind of hard to believe that a guy who took a gunshot to the jaw would die like that. And they'd be right. The army was able to grab the two and get them out of there and head to their base in the homeland, where Swinehart is working as the chief doctor. He reveals the arrows were laced with a powerful curse, strong enough to actually kill Bigby. However, due to his own power, it would take more than one arrow. It would need 2 arrows to do the trick, but because Blue took the second, Bigby survived, but weakened. And the reason Blue seemed to survive the instant death arrow, thanks to the Witch's Cloak's own magic. Unfortunately, Swinehart can't remove it just yet, as he still doesn't know if the curse will be in effect again once he removes the arrow. Yeah, he'll be fine, just needs to rub some mud on it. Next is essentially their final stand against this foe. Blue, Bigby, and the army face off against the adversary Puppet in an epic final battle, all while Prince Charming and Sinbad take the final bomb to the enemy's gate to the Mundy world, fight the guards, and Charming making a heroic sacrifice to detonate the bomb while still inside. Bigby and Blue are able to defeat the adversary Puppet, with Bigby giving Blue an opening for a sneak attack and cutting his head again. With his death, the gate destroyed, and the rest of the army asleep thanks to Briar, the army is eventually defeated. It's also when the villains realize why they lost, because in the end, their greatest victory became their greatest downfall. Once Geppetto took power, essentially he kept things the same. No one was able to advance, evolve, or learn anything new. As mentioned in Volume 5, he hates the modern world, and though he had some of his soldiers understand things like using guns and driving, he wasn't interested in learning modern warfare or how to build weapons like theirs. Technology was something he couldn't understand, and since he couldn't understand, meaning that he couldn't control it, and thus he wanted to destroy it. He was so confident that just his numbers and powerful allies and puppets would be enough to be victorious, and despite being proven time and time again that victory wasn't assured, yet he stayed in denial. It wasn't until Pinocchio left where he saw the writing on the wall and decided to turn tail and hide. Do you notice I never mentioned him when talking about the final battle? That's because he was hiding out with the rest of his remaining puppets and left his army to chance. And even if they lost, he hoped that they would never find him. Unfortunately for him, Pinocchio knew about his hideout, and after honoring the fallen, celebrating their victory, and starting the process of getting the arrow out of Blue, the Fables come for him. And though they immediately wanted to execute him, Pinocchio struck a deal with them. Despite everything he's done, he still feels responsible for his father's actions. So in exchange for the info that he gave to help win the war, they instead are just going to make him both sign a declaration of surrender, so when the army wakes up from the sleep spell, they'll back off, and general enmity papers, which on paper sounds like he's forgiven for all his crimes, but in truth, this is the beginning of the longest form of community service you will ever see, with everyone keeping an eye on him, because the instant he slips up, they're gonna kill him. And that's the end of the first chapter of Fables. Honestly, if this was the end of the series, it would have been a high note. It had twists and turns, amazing character highlights, like Cinderella, who helped Pinocchio get back and fought with Hansel and the 2 puppet spies, Charming and Sinbad's back and forth as they went on their final mission was pretty hilarious. Blue dealing with a Fable badger by the name of Stinky, who tries to be his wingman before Rose rejects him, and the adversary puppet and the Snow Queen seeing the dangerous situation they're in and trying to come up with a way to be victorious, only for her to fall under the sleep spell. And everyone's stories were pretty much wrapped up. Bigby and Snow were fine together with all their children. Beauty and the Beast were in a good spot. Flycatcher and Red were starting a relationship. Rose and Blue didn't get together, and though she could have handled it better, both were doing fine individually, as Rose and Snow were on good terms, and she ran the farm better than ever, while Blue saved his friends and helped Bigby put a stop to the villain that brought everyone so much pain. Sure, there was still Jack Horner stories along with Cinderella, but that could have been told through their spin-offs. This could have been a solid end to the series, but nope, there's more tales and many more adventures to come. Next time, we're diving into Chapter 2 of the Season of Fables, where we see what they'll do with the reclaimed homeland, the fall of a friend, the great Fable crossover, a gathering of witches, and the forming of a super team, an unexpected turn for Rose Red, and the coming of darkness that kinda had a weak payoff. Later.